I am going to teach for just a minute. I've got a couple things I want to go over. If you did the study guide for this class, you'll notice there was some things at the end about business meetings that I never got to. So I just want to spend a few minutes on that. I'm recording it for the students that are via recording, and then we'll take the exam.
How
okay?
Are they taking the final?
And so let me just share. First of all, the reason that we have what we call polity, church polity. Church polity really refers to the concept of church government, but polity is a form of government, the way in which you govern yourself. And so when it comes to, there's all kinds of meetings that go on in a church, but we're not talking about leadership meetings. We're talking about what starts from the board level on up, okay? The board, depending upon their bylaws, has a certain number of meetings a year, and the pastor and the board. And at that level, it's not really extremely organized. What I mean by that is organized in order to get business done. There's just a few people. With a few people, you can handle it, And as an example for a board meeting, just a very quick agenda would be open in prayer, have a devotional, discuss and go over old business, things that you've discussed in the past that you need to make a decision on. And so you go over your old business, and then maybe you make the decision on that old business. Then you go to new business, and that is things that need to be handled by the board that has not been brought up yet. While most boards, if they have new business, a lot of times that new business is critical, so they have to make decisions and deal with it. A better way to do it, if you can, is never vote on new business. Just vote on the old business. It gives people a month to pray about the new stuff before you have your next meeting, whatever. So you'd have a devotional, you'd have the old business, you go over that. Your new business, you go over that, and an adjournment, a dismissal. So you can see that that's fairly. It's not complicated. When there's a few people, you don't need governmental structure in order to get business done. However, when it comes to, and you know what, let me sit over here. I think I can see better. Let me move here. You can see me better if I move, okay? Let me go over the problem you have when it gets beyond the board level, when it gets beyond just a few people. And that would be your next level, which depending upon your church tradition, in the Assemblies of God, the next level is like presbytery meetings, where you have presbyters. Pastor Kyle, being a presbyter, goes to these meetings. And you need a little more structure because there's more people there. There's not 4 or 5, there's 45. And in order to accomplish business, this is why you have structure. In order to accomplish business, you have to have some structure to get business done, because if you don't, the loudest voice takes over. Mm-hmm. So the structure begins in the Assemblies of God at the presbytery level, but when it goes to a district council and then on to general council. Has anybody ever been to a district council? Okay. If you've been to a district council business, if you've never been to a district council business meeting, you need to do it. I think our next one is end of April. And it's the 100th anniversary of the Northern Cal Nevada District. So it's going to be a big deal. Mm-hmm. And when you go to a business meeting, especially on that level, it's governed by what we call Robert's Rules of Order. So it's a little book called Robert's Rules of Order, and it shares structure so for 2 reasons, probably more, but I'm going to give you 2. Number 1, so you can get something done. And you'll hear why in just a minute. And number two, so that all sides can be heard. As an example, if you have especially a very controversial issue before the district council, they may pass a motion that says something to this measure. Anybody who speaks to this issue can only speak for 3 minutes. They put a time limit on it. They can put a time limit on it. That way, you can't do what our government does, where somebody stands up and talks for 15 hours trying to, So you might say something like, we make a motion that debate is limited to 3 minutes per person, and there has to be a pro and a con, In other words, what we mean by that is you can only speak for 3 minutes, and if you're for the issue and the person before you was for the issue, you can't speak until somebody speaks who's against the issue. Mm-hmm. And then you're next online to speak for the issue, so that both sides are being able to be heard. That's why if you're at a district council and it's a very volatile situation, people will go to the microphones, and then all of a sudden the chairman will say, microphone number 5, you are next. Are you for or against this motion? And if they say, well, I'm against the motion, but the last person that spoke was against the motion, he'll say, hold on just a minute. Microphone number 7, are you for or against? I'm against. Microphone number 3, I'm for. Okay, you speak. Then we go back to microphone number 5. What's the purpose of it? So that both sides can be heard, so that the loudest voice can't take over. So the reason for Robert's Rules of Orders and structure in these business meetings is so that business can get done. And number 2, so that both sides can be heard. And it's fair. Okay? So let me just go over just a few rules. There's all kinds of them. I'm not going to go into any great detail, but I just want to give you a feel for how this operates. Okay? If you want to address an issue, you're recognized by the chairman. You don't speak without being recognized by the chairman. And then you say something to this. I make a motion that we don't have exams, final exams in Generation School or Ministry classes.
I'm for it. I'm speaking first.
Before anybody can speak to that motion, there has to be a second.
I second that.
If nobody seconds the motion that Lexi made, it dies for lack of a second. But if you were to second it, then we can discuss the motion. And we discuss it by pro and con, although in that case, it'd probably all be pro, right? But let's say that all of a sudden we're discussing, this is being discussed, and all of a sudden Andy says, I would like to make an amendment to that motion. Okay, what is your amendment? Andy says, I would like to amend it to say that there are no final exams on certain courses in Generation School of Ministry, such as blah, 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 blah. If nobody seconds the amendment, it dies. And you're still just talking about the original motion. But if there's a second, you can't talk about whether or not we can have exams anymore. You're not talking about the motion anymore. Now we're discussing the amendment. You see the structure. And so and if somebody were to then, let's say Mike were to stand up and say, well, I don't think we should have exams. The chairman would say, Mike, we're not discussing that now. We're discussing whether or not we will on these particular classes.
That's right. Come on.
And then finally, somebody may say, I move for the previous question. What that means is, let's vote. Let's stop arguing or discussing and let's vote. But that's a motion. And that has to have a second. And once it has a second, then we're voting on whether or not to vote. Whether or not to cease discussion and to vote. Okay? So if we've decided to vote, now because of the progression we've just made, we're not voting on the motion yet, we're voting on the amendment as to whether it's limited to these. We make that vote, and then the amendment either passes or fails, and the motion is either as it originally was or as amended. Then we're discussing that again. Then we go back. See, it's a process. It can get confusing, but can you see how that really it gets the job done? Because there's going to be so many different things out there that pretty soon you have no clue where you are. Sure. It's the chairman's job to help everybody realize what we're voting on. Now, right now, because someone raised the cream, we're voting on whether or not to vote. That's all you're voting on. In other words, we're voting on whether or not to stop the discussion and voting. And if it passes, then the chairman says, okay, now we're back to the amendment. So you see how it eliminates somebody taking over is what it does. And it helps you get the job done. So it's a process of learning this. Very interesting would be to go to a district council and watch it in action. I've got some things here about some of the agenda. What's a quorum? Does anybody know what a quorum is?
I was just going to ask what's a quorum.
Okay.
And I was like, maybe that's a stupid question.
No, it's a good question.
Is it in Latin or something?
Well, it's probably Latin, but what a quorum means is based on your bylaws, what your bylaws say. You cannot have an official business meeting if you don't have a quorum. And what that means is enough people there to constitute an official business meeting. Now, it depends on what your bylaws say. A lot of bylaws say that 2/3 of the membership has to be there for it to be a legal meeting. That's why people sign in. What is it, Sunday? They're having the business meeting at one church. You have to sign in. The purpose for signing in is you get ballots so that only members have ballots, but also to determine whether we have a quorum or not. A lot of churches nowadays say a quorum is a majority, which would be 51% of the membership. Some churches have even gone to 33 1/3%. Why? Because people aren't as interested in business meetings nowadays as they used to be. And in order to conduct business, you've got to have the people there. So a meeting isn't even official unless a quorum has been met of the members. And that's based on what your bylaws say. It's
that happened when I went to general council. There wasn't enough of the people there. There was enough people who had registered for general council, but there wasn't enough.
Hey, we're talking about quorums and business meetings.
Quorums, we were just talking about.
I told them you were going to have to worry about that. Not worry about it, but take care of it Sunday.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's funny because Jordan, he said we got to make sure we get our harem.
Our harem. By the way, I'm recording this.
Yeah, he said harem. He said my goal in life is to say that enough to where somebody from the microphone accidentally says harem instead of quorum.
Well,
harem and strong today.
Yeah. While I'm seeing you, Janie and I will be late to the business meeting because we're handling that funeral that we've got after service.
I heard about our snafu there. So yeah.
You're planning
so
something?
So some of the partners from Fairlock will be coming up late for that.
A few of them. I'm gonna try to get as many as I can there on time, but a few will be late. So
Sounds good.
okay,
I heard it's Dora's husband.
yeah. So
Okay.
okay.
See ya.
So that's what a quorum is, okay, and that's what Robert's Rules of Order is, and it's for the purpose of getting business done, okay. In fact, those of you that are part of one church, even if you're not, you could come and watch some of this in action Sunday. Now, I don't know how detailed they get in Robert's Rules of Order, but there will be some of it, but not like a district council, okay.
You have to be a member, right?
You have to remember to vote. You don't have to remember to be there, but you have to remember to vote. Okay.
That happened when I went to general council. There's so many people sleeping in that they couldn't start the meeting yet because there was enough people there. And so every person that came in there just counted until we got to the 2/3.
Which is
Right.
a bummer if you did like a super far travel to go.
Yeah,
You're like, oh,
right.
we don't have enough.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's just a few of the things. I just wanted to go over that with you because some of that was on the exam. And any questions before we stop here? No, we're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to end this meeting.